Hello, Gears and Gaming fans, and welcome to the very first episode of the brand new Gears Intel podcast. This is a Gears of War focused fan show bringing you discussions, ramblings, spicy rants, and who knows what else. Come with us as we embark on a journey through the Gears universe, visiting all aspects of the franchise, along with many other games and all things Gears of War adjacent. I'm one of your hosts and I go by KDB. You may know me as the person behind the Gears Intel fan Twitter account. But don't worry, it's not just me you'll have the pleasure of listening to going forward. I took it upon myself to form my own little Delta squad because there's no way I could do this by myself. So yes, joining me for this new project are two fellow Gears and Gaming fans. Introducing first a man who will undoubtedly become a fan favourite among listeners going forward, purely because he has a voice that would make even the most hardened cog soldier weak at the knees. And that's podcaster, writer, dog daddy, hailing all the way from the mysterious, magical and bonny lands of Scotland, often found struggling his way through Apex Legends. It is David Smiley. Hello, David.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, mate. Thanks for joining me. But also, we have the impressively hunky third leg of this podcast tripod. It's a man with so much love for Homer Simpson and Mexican holidays. He combined the two and inked them on his body forever. Tattoo and gaming collector, podcaster, writer, and human daddy. Joining us from the mean streets of Essex to bless us with gaming knowledge sprinkled with F-bombs, it's Alex Aldridge. Hello, Alex.
Hello, sir. We're on the least mean
Nilfheim.
streets. We're the least mean streets of Essex you could possibly get.
Yeah.
There's pink houses and green houses and yellow. It's like a wonderful rainbow land around here.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
No meanness allowed in Saffron Walden, I'm afraid.
Yeah, mean streets or not, it's nice to have you. It's nice to have you both.
It's great to be here.
So this is our premiere episode of this podcast, and so this podcast is the result of me becoming a little bit kind of fed up with just doing stuff on the Twitter account for Gears Intel, and I thought, I know, it'd be a great idea. Why don't I start another podcast and possibly a YouTube channel as well, as if I didn't have enough, stuff to do. So I asked you both to join me on this journey, which I appreciate you doing. And today we're going to we're going to talk about our starts with Gears of War, our initial discovery of the franchise and how we found it since then and how it sits today. Before we get to Gears of War though, so I asked you both to join me. I feel a bit like I'm in a handicap match at the moment, a wrestling pay-per-view, because you're an established tag team and I'm solo. So, I'm handicapped. I'm going up against you two, but we're all working together. So, yes, you are established. You have your own podcast together, which is a Winner Is You podcast. Why don't you just tell... I sort of know, but for anybody that doesn't know and fancies listening to a gaming podcast, Alex, how did A Winner Is You come about? And, yeah, what's the whole idea, behind it?
Would you say you are the Jim Cornette to our Midnight Express?
Yes, that's what exactly what I'm trying to say.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad we've got that established. I think... initially, so David and I met at university, and we were sitting in a lecture, and we both had a mutual friend, and I noticed that he and this friend were playing Hangman, right? And I was looking at what the answer was, and I think it was Streets of Rage, and I was like, hang on a minute, this guy gets it. Yeah. Nobody's talking about Streets of Rage.
Yeah.
So then I don't even know how we went on from there, but I think you approached me and said you wanted to do something. And we started podcasting in, I believe, 2009, off the back of my working at Blockbuster and getting free rentals to review early so we could pretend we were legit.
It's early days of podcasts, that really, isn't it?
I remember, so like very often in my life I've come up, so I'm quite reserved with it now and I'll often hold back, but whenever you're talking about, you meet someone new and you're talking about your interests and someone goes, what do you like, and then I play a lot of video games, and someone goes, oh yeah, I like video games. 9 times out of 10 they don't like video games like I like video games. So usually I'm just like, oh yeah, and I hold back, but then there was like Alex and I started speaking about something and it just became apparent that he was one of the first people I'd ever met that sort of liked video games on the same level as I liked video games. It's not just a casual hobby; it's almost like a lifestyle for us. So like, yeah, we did that, and then we got set. Because, like, well, what did you do? Journalism at uni, Alex. I did publishing and journalism, and you did media studies. Yeah, and we had a lot of crossover lectures. And as part of that, we got told to write a blog. And Alex and I were like, well, we both like games. Why don't we just write a blog about something we like and just do it together?
Oh, did we do the blog first then? And then podcast later?
I think it started as a blog, yeah.
Oh, you're right, yeah. I think you're right, actually, yeah. That's a good point.
And then we were like, oh, let's just carry this on because it's fun. Fast forward, 12 years, 9, 10?
Good
11,
Lord.
I don't know. Over a decade, and we're still here. Much older, much balder, talking about video games. I was going to say more coherently, but probably not. It's probably just as incoherently as ever.
Yeah. No, I completely get it I had similar experiences with college and uni, where you sort of you've come across those people who are obsessed about certain things. Initially for me it was film, and then finding people that were as interested in video games, and but it isn't really for me until more recently with recent years with podcasting, where with meeting people online is where, like, in my day-to-day life I have friends who, as you say, they like video games. They don't like video games like I like video games, and it's really online still to this day. So my best, closest friends, will not be as obsessed. And I've met some great people in the last few years online who share the same obsessions. And doing podcasts like this and like some of the other stuff I do is a great opportunity to just have those conversations, because I don't have them with my wife. I don't have them with my day-to-day friends, who are all fantastic people, but there's nothing wrong with having different interests. Well, that's cool to hear the kind of inception about A Winner Is You. I do recommend it to anybody who wants another gaming podcast in their feed. I'll put, links and stuff to it in the description of this so you can find it. It's
actually in a different guise to what it was originally. I think we basically did the standard banter news podcast first of all. I think we've changed names a few times. We were Gamertron for a bit. We did a PlayStation specific one that was quite fun for a while. And then
Red E or something, that was?
The Not Red E podcast, yeah. And then David, I think we'd had a break for it from a bit, and David said he wanted to bring back A Winner Is You because it was his favourite name that we'd ever had for a pod. So now we brought it back as a game club podcast. So we basically pick a game, usually either a new game or one that has an anniversary coming up, or just we sometimes theme them for a month or so. And then we do deep dives, kind of like we're going to do here. We have actually done Gears of War on A Winner Is You. So
we have.
People can make this whole show irrelevant if they want to go to that and find how little we know, and then come back and go, I'm not listening to those frauds anymore. They don't know what I'm on about. So yeah, please give us time.
It's so funny because I've heard that episode, and I think so. Just to give some kind of behind the scenes, I have wanted to launch a podcast for Giz Intel for nearly a year now, and I even recorded a pilot episode which was just me, and I had a second episode kind of noted and semi-scripted and ready to go, and I didn't put it out because it didn't feel right. I wasn't confident in it, and I didn't want just a podcast of just me talking. And then I can't remember how I discovered Winner Is You. I don't think it was Gears of War. I think it was Resident Evil. There was possibly, maybe when Village come out, or you were playing Village or did a Village episode, and I was scouring and finding stuff. And then I listened to the Gears of War one, and that was the first time, and this is months ago. I don't know when you put that episode out. It was ages ago. And I listened to it, and sometimes you listen to podcasts, you're like, oh yeah, I think that as well. And these guys get it. And I could hear myself being on that kind of conversation thinking, oh yeah, I could have a proper chat. No, you're still there. You're still here.
Everybody died.
I'm here. Have you died? Your internet died. Can you hear us, Alex?
Hello. Oh my god,
Alex.
Right,
we see you.
Okay, cool.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
You didn't go anywhere. You were still there.
Oh, okay.
You just suddenly went a bit like a rabbit and started. Have I died?
It was a rabbit in headlights.
Kelsey just went totally robotic and then pixelated. David was frozen and I was the only one moving. I thought, okay. Everybody
know,
else has
You
died.
weren't actually talking about the podcast. You were just asking the general question.
Yeah,
Have I died?
have I died and come back on a Gears of War podcast? What happened?
That was superb. That's staying in.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no. I heard the Gears of War podcast, and I remember thinking back then, like, I was like, if I ever pick up that podcast, I need sort of guys like this. I need somebody like this, and I just didn't really know anybody. Like my brother, both of my brothers are pretty hardcore Gears of War players, but like just the multiplayer, and that's it. And yeah,
What,
it's
rolling shotgun?
yeah, and it's just a different kind of. And also, I one of them might even be listening. I just wouldn't trust them on a podcast, to be honest. So yeah, so they're not involved. But yeah, so yes, thank you, for helping me out on this journey. Let's see how it goes. We have some plans for future episodes and stuff for the YouTube channel, streams, game nights, kind of lots of things really that we want to focus on Gears of War. And a winner is you is more varied. This is going to be Gears of War and Gears of War adjacent stuff, as I mentioned. So with that in mind, David, let's start with you. How did you discover Gears of War? What's your earliest Gears of War memories?
I was actually thinking about this when you were discussing the format of this podcast, and I was thinking, when did I definitely played the first one when it came out, and I think it just sort of started from there. I don't remember my first sort of interaction. I've got a vague memory of watching some E3 presentation with Cliff Blazinski, and he was showing off the sort of the cover mechanics and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember. It's just always been a part of my life, it seems, since it's come out. I was trying to think about also when I first played it, like my initial thoughts, and I remember the jump out memory I have of that time is just how, and I hate to use the word because it's the most overused word in video games ever, but how visceral the violence was, and that like when you were chainsawing an enemy, or you were like hitting the wall when you were going into cover, everything just felt like it had a thump to it and a weight to it, and I liked that, and it came at a time where I just think the industry needed that. I don't think there's anything particularly that Gears did in those days that was sort of groundbreaking, new and unusual, but I guess what it had on its side was it had a really shit hot Unreal Engine at the time, and it just did everything competently and well, and it set it in a universe that was fun, engaging, and just like ridiculously violent.
Yeah.
And it just sort of came together and into this sort of globular mess that is just an absolutely wonderful series. That I guess we'll get into it, whether it's lost its way or not over the years, but it was
the mechanics you mentioned. So I can very specifically remember the very first time I saw anything from Gears of War. And this was at this weird point where YouTube was maybe about a year away, and so you didn't really watch much gaming content online. But at the time, you either got it in magazines still, or so MTV had a gaming show, and I remember them previewing Gears of War and showing the Unreal Engine and showing the cover mechanics, like you said, and it catching my eye and thinking, okay. Because I was the only shooter I really played was Halo 2 at the time. I wasn't really on those early Call of Duties, but I thought this looked kind of cool. And then about a year later, just before it came out, it was decision time for PS3 or Xbox 360, and PS3 was obviously going to be horrifically expensive. And I was at home. I was still living at home at the time, and I remember it was just before Christmas. The TV advert came on, which has Mad World as the trailer, which has Mad World as the soundtrack. And I saw that trailer, and the decision was made for me there. And I was a PS2 player. And my brother had an Xbox, and I loved playing Halo 2 on that. But I had a PS2. I had a GameCube as well, and decision was made. Xbox 360 there and then, and so I got an Xbox 360 for Christmas, and with Gears of War, and I've never looked back. And I think to this day, Christmas Day that year, so this would have been 2006, Christmas Day 2006, with Gears of War and the 360, I've never had a longer session of gaming. I think I played it from about 10 a.m.
Yes.
till 3 a.m. with a buddy of mine who lived in the same sort of street. Also got the console. We got Xbox Live. We were just playing all day, and then I played it the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And yeah, so it was. I didn't even have a HDTV at the time, but it still just blew me away with how good it looked, and you know, the violence, and yeah, there was so much to it that just hooked me at the time. And I would describe myself as a hardcore fan. But then I see some people online, I'm like, I'm not as hardcore as you. But anyway. So yeah, it was that advert, really, that Gary Jules song that converted me to 360. And I've been with Xbox ever since. It's such a ridiculous thing to say. I have a PS3 now. I've never had a PS4. I don't have a PS5. But yeah, it won me over and made me decide where to spend my money. Alex,
that used to be
Dave,
that was sort of the de facto home of the shooter, wasn't it? The Xbox 360 era. They really sort of made their bed made out of shooters. Their little comfy quilted bed. So if you played shooters, that was where you wanted to go, was the Xbox. And
yeah.
I wonder if it has to have been a concerted effort, right? They had to have sort of targeted that audience and thought, right, we're going to go hard here for the shooter crowd.
Probably because of the lack of response to the original Xbox in Japan. They probably just thought, it's not really our market, I guess. Let's go for the bros.
Yeah, and it paid off, and they revolutionised online gameplay, with Xbox Live and stuff like that. So, yeah, it worked. But yeah, Alex, how about you? What was your first introduction to Gears?
So I remember as a kid, I was very in the Nintendo camp. So I was very anti PlayStation. I got the original Xbox, and I remember I was desperate to get the 360 when I knew that was coming out. I worked at the time at Barclays, I think, and so I had enough money to kind of put towards it for Christmas that year, so 2005, to go, my parents to get it for me. Apparently my 360 arrived on Christmas Eve. I remember my dad being like, you almost had a terrible Christmas, mate. But luckily it arrived, and it came with... Yeah, it came with Cameo and Perfect Dark Zero.
Yeah.
And I remember playing both of those and thinking I hadn't actually got a new console. I was really disappointed in both of them. And a mate,
Perfect Dark, aren't you? That has really felt.
I was like so into Perfect Dark on the N64 as well. That really broke my heart. And a guy joined Barclays. I think he'd been in the system and he'd been there before, and he'd come. So he walked in as this like returning hero, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? And he walked into the break room where me and a friend, I'd brought my N64 in. We were playing Diddy Kong Racing, and he walked in and he said, "Oh, you having a nerd day, are you?" I said, "Yeah." And he eventually ended up giving me like loads of Dreamcast stuff. And he became this like game guru to me. And I remember when I was talking about my 360, he said, "Oh, you heard about Gears of War? You're looking forward to that?" I said, "No, what's that?" And then I thought YouTube was around at that time, and he'd showed me a video.
It would have been like
really
the year
nascent stages.
Yeah, it was very early. 2004 and 5 was when YouTube launched. So
yeah, so he showed me something, and I remember thinking, okay, this is like a new game now, because at the moment I feel like I'm playing Xbox games on my 360, because I think I also had Condemned, which is a terrifying game but not very pretty. I think I had Call of Duty 2 as well, which didn't feel that groundbreaking, and I remember seeing that and thinking, this is going to be when I feel like I've got a proper new console. And the first time I played it was exactly that. Like, this is what I got a 360 for. This is something different.
Dead
this
Rising,
looks incredible.
I think, is the one that I'm just interjecting here. Dead Rising, I think, is the game that made me think, oh, this is a new console.
Because they had a billion zombies on the screen.
Yeah.
Do you know what the issue with Dead Rising was? Despite how good the game is, unless you had an HD TV, you couldn't read the text.
Yeah.
You couldn't read it. I think that's what made me have to get one, I think.
Yeah, same.
I think I ironically got an HD TV the same day I got a Wii, which is not needed. But I actually think I remember because I worked at Barclays, somebody came up to me and was like, "I'm really bad on my numbers this week. Can you sign up for a Barclays account so I can get the stats? We'll match your overdraft from the account you've already got." And it was like 850 quid. So I just went and spaffed my entire overdraft that day on a Wii and an HD TV. Like, cheers, lads.
Yes.
That's hilarious, because I also rinsed my overdraft with a Wii, but it wasn't for me. It was a gift for my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife.
Oh, well, that worked. That worked.
Yeah. So that
Did your dad pay that off for you, or was it just mine? Because then I went to uni, and my poor old dad paid off the entire overdraft. 'Cause he was so sick of getting the late fees letters coming to his house while I'm in Aberdeen talking about Gears with David.
I think I was in it for a while.
Xbox 360 came out, I was doing my apprenticeship, and I was only getting £500 a month doing that apprenticeship, and I spent my entire month's salary on the Xbox 360. I got the launch model with 5 games, so I just went out, took the day off work, stood in the queue to game, got in there, got my console, went home to I went back to my friend's house, and then we just sat TV beside TV and just played. Probably Project Gotham Zero and Call of Duty 2 all day would be the two ones we mainly played.
Did that console survive?
No, it got the red ring. It got the red ring.
I think I went through about 3 or 4 by the time I was done.
Yeah.
Can I posit a question to David? Have we ever actually played Gears co-op? Because I
don't think so.
No,
we've not even played Horde mode. I've wanted to play Horde mode with you basically since
we played it on 4 with Scott.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it just wasn't as good, was it? It's 2 the one where it, or is it 3?
Yeah,
the one
2's the gold standard for me.
That's where is that where you can buy stuff and you can you can that would be 2. I think that's
because I remember I when I went to uni in Aberdeen, I moved up there because a friend of mine from where I grew up and where I went to school with, he was living in Aberdeen because his dad worked for Shell and had been posted up there because of all the oil they used to have, and had bought himself a house. And 2 years later, he was ready to come back to England again. And he said to his son, my friend, why don't you go to Aberdeen University? You can live in this house. You don't have to go to halls. You haven't got to pay anything. Just come live here. So he was doing that. I was getting sick of Barclays, even though we had a cool guy giving me Dreamcast and stuff. I went to visit him, and he said, why don't you just come to uni and live with me? Because that would be awesome. And then I'll do the same course as me. I'll give you all the books, blah, blah, blah. The course was management studies, and I hated it. Yeah. So I ended up doing media at a different university. I swapped universities from Aberdeen to Robert Gordon, which is where David and I met. That guy now earns like hundreds of thousands of dollars. He lives in America. I wish I'd stuck with that. But 2 of my other friends from St. Neots, where I grew up, we all moved to this house in Aberdeen together. So there was 4 of us there. And we used to play Gears online and co-op. Like all 4 of us had Xbox 360s, and all 4 of us would play it online. So I think I mainly played all of Gears with a friend of mine from the house rather than David, which is weird because David and I, well, David is probably the person who loves it the most that I've ever met. So I'm surprised we've never played it together.
Yeah, no. The co-op is stuff that I kind of do. I haven't even done co-op on the recent games. It's usually something I do to just tick off the achievements. This kind of brings us into my next point, which is sort of what's your journey been with the game or the franchise since those early days. And for me, I've played every single game. I've read a few books. I've read I think all of the graphic novels, but there's still plenty of things that I haven't experienced with Gears. So you talk about the co-op, and I don't think I've ever played like the 4th game co-op or maybe the 3rd game co-op. It's like those first 2 and then the more recent one. There's plenty of achievements I've never touched. There's even a few modes that I've never played. I mean, the game, just thinking about the games themselves, the package you get is quite incredible. Particularly more recently, where the Gears 5 that came out, it's you have this high level campaign, high production level, long campaign, high level multiplayer, and the Horde mode as well, which is a pretty beefy package, and that's kind of been its main selling point with all the games. But it's not just the games. Like I say, there's books and stuff and everything. But yeah, David, have you been along for every single game since? Is there other stuff in the franchise that you've enjoyed or disliked? What's your journey been since those early days?
Yeah, I've played all of the games and enjoyed them all. I think they're all good games. I think some are less good, obviously, than others. And then there was a period there when Alex and I were doing the Winner Is You podcast where I was trying to absorb basically every bit of Gears content I could. So I started reading the books. I think I've read like the first 3 books and then I fell off. I've read some of the graphic novels. Yeah, I generally like when a game comes out, a Gears game comes out, it'll be a day one. Well, I was going to say purchase, but it'll be on Games Pass these days, so it'll be a day one play. And then I've sort of started trying to, since we'd been discussing this podcast, sort of tried to dabble with the sort of media that surrounds it, and I've noticed that they've started releasing the books on audio books on Audible, so I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to listen in order though, and I did see that the first book isn't coming out until, is it later this month?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with that, and then sort of make my way through them. But there's a good few now, isn't there? It's like 7.
I think it's 8 in total, because one just come out 3 or 4 months ago. But yeah, I've not read them all. I mean, the good thing about the books as well, which isn't always the case with these franchises, is they're canon. Which these other franchises, they'll just, like Star Wars, I can think of, it's all extended universe stuff. It's not all necessarily canon. Gears of War, and I think, I've heard them talk about this and whether this continues. They've kind of gone out of their way to make the graphic novels and those books, anything they do, all canon. So it's all, can enhance your sort of enjoyment of the story.
It's usually your first interaction with new characters and things like that, so they'll usually pop up in a book, and then they'll appear in later games, which I think has always been really fun.
Yeah, no, that's it. There's characters that have become like fan favorites that made their way into the games, and that I really love. I think as I say, I've been along for every single game too. It's funny you mentioned the Game Pass thing, because Gears 5 was the first one that launched day one on Game Pass, and I think for me that was a turning point for Game Pass in general as well, because I was obviously ready for Gears 5, and when they said, oh no, if you've got a subscription you play this day one, and I remember trying to explain it to my brothers, like, you don't have to pay pay
felt like
60 quid. It did. I couldn't believe it. So that is something I'm obviously excited about for the future games as well, because I presume they're all going to be on Game Pass. But it's a very wide-ranging franchise. It feels like it's one of Xbox's biggest franchises, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later about its place specifically now, and kind of I have some feelings about more recent announcements and stuff. But yeah, it's one of Xbox's biggest franchises. It's so much money has gone into this franchise. I don't think it's going anywhere. And if you want a starting point, it doesn't have to be the games. You can go and read a graphic novel or a book or something like that. And it's there's lots of entry points and lots of things to soak up. But I also appreciate, and I want to make this clear, like if I've said it already, I'm not a Gears of War expert. I don't proclaim to be like a lore expert or knowing everything. I'm not. I would never. I'm not going to judge either of you. Which is why, Alex, now I'll ask you, what's your franchise experience been since those early days? Have you played every game? Have you experienced any of that stuff outside of the games, or do you even have any interest in that stuff? And if you don't, that's fine.
I've played every game except Tactics, which I hope we get to cover on here, because I've really been wanting to play that for a while.
Yeah, we will.
So in this house in Aberdeen that I was living in, me and my friend Bear, we set about playing all of them in co-op on Insane. So I remember,
I think on co-op is probably the only way to get through it on Insane.
Well, that's what I thought too. So I'll skip to Gears of War 2 first of all, because we all went really hard on that multiplayer in that house, and I think Wingman is one of the greatest multiplayer modes I've ever played. We were obsessed with that. Bear was my wingman. We were tearing it up with the rolling shotgun jobbies.
Going to mind, is that just 2v2 Wingman?
It's 2v2v2v2. It was like everybody's in a group of two, basically. And that was almost like a battle royale, wasn't it? Because it was like one death and you're out.
I think I was actually thinking that when you were saying that one of the things that was really interesting me back when it first came out was that the Gears of War was, I was used to like Call of Duty and Halo multiplayer. You just die and come back, and like death is quite low stakes, whereas death is incredibly high stakes in the Gears multiplayer, or at least it was in those days. You basically had one life and that was it. And it was last team standing. That was really cool, actually.
Yeah, you could obviously revive your friend, which was, I guess, the point of the 2-player teams. So I remember he and I had got through the first two on Insane, and we were playing Gears 3 together, and we got to the final boss, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever played in my life in any game. it felt impossible. Like we just could not do it. We were playing it for hours and hours and hours to the point where he said like he'd moved out by this point. So he said like I'm gonna have to go home now, mate. It's
Is
getting
that
late.
because you were playing Gears? He's like, I can't.
But
work
he
with
just
you anymore. I
this
can't
is
do
too
this."
much, mate. All you want to do is play Gears on Insane. I need some sleep. So he went home. He texted me the next morning and went, "Oh, I've done it. By the way, I'm not playing it in co-op. I don't ever want to play that again. But I woke up early this morning and I just beat it in like one go. So I've done it." And I was like, "Okay, well, it's obviously easier single player then." Nah, it took me 2 hours. I was so livid with him. Like, how could you betray me? Why are you so much better than me at this game? I don't understand. I do the podcast. I've got the website. I'm the best gamer. Why can't I do it? So that was a tough moment. That one. And then I've played the other games since then. I haven't gone outside of the games for anything. So this is another thing I would quite like to get into, because I remember even when David told me he was into the graphic novels or the books, I was like, what are you on about? What are they talking about in the books? It's just like
It's just
like dudes shooting shit in it. Like, what is this? Is Dom gonna cry longer on a page? I don't get it. So yeah, this is I've played the games a lot, especially the multiplayer for the second one. I played that more than anything until Apex. Mm-hmm. I feel like David kind of touched on it earlier, how the games, the attitude and the style of the game felt like it really was a product of everything that had come before it, but not a lot of what's come since.
Yeah.
It was really still like dudes in their basements shooting. Like it felt like a very Doom style attitude, which apart from Doom these days you don't really seem to get. You wouldn't get a studio coming out saying it's going to be bigger, better and more badass stuff. You just wouldn't get that nowadays. And I think that really spoke to what gaming was at that time. So yeah, I haven't delved into any of the graphic novels or anything, but I definitely will for this. Audiobooks as well. I didn't even know they were on audiobooks.
Yeah, I would say
there.
it could be don't be snobby about audiobooks. I think particularly in adult life it can be difficult to read a book. Everything's got to stop to read a book. You get an audiobook, you can soak it up at any time. One of the most recent Gears books actually. I have the book. I have the physical copy. I have every book over there, but I just listen to it on audiobook because it's practically easier for me to do that. It's funny you mentioned the sort of attitude of the game, and I think people who aren't fans of Gears of War might have a certain view of it as this
absolutely
bro shooter or dude bro shooter, and there's a lot of it that you could say okay it is, but I will maintain and fight and argue that the people who've been critical of its lack of story or whatever or diversity are kind of just wrong, because it's a game which has incredibly diverse characters, which had diverse characters
before it was a fashion.
This is 2006 and after, and the subsequent games and things, and story wise, and for those who know so the guy who created Gears, Cliff Bleszinski, his ideas behind the story and what fit into it and his experience in life. It's all very emotional, and the spoiler alert, the death of Dom in Gears 3 is, it's incredibly impactful and sad. It hits me still to this day. There's other character deaths and things. It's far more than just a bro shooter, and this goes back to what I was saying about the package of the game, because you've got the multiplayer, which bro shooter, fine. But those campaigns are so high-end and so Hollywood level, they really pushed the campaigns for story and visuals and that kind of experience. So, and I would like this podcast to kind of highlight that stuff a lot more. We can have some fun and talk about the multiplayer, all day, and we will. But yeah, there's a lot of depth to the story, stuff that gets overlooked, and there's been critics of recent story changes and things. Fine, we can talk all about that on future episodes, but I think it's a fantastic franchise. As I say, I've been along with it now since day one, which is weird because so all this time later, it's only now I'm kind of specifically thinking, let's make some Gears of War content. It's I'm sort of late to that party, but I feel like there's still plenty to say and going to be lots to say in the future. There was just a couple of other things I wanted to touch on. So I think one of my peaks of fandom, which is kind of ironic looking back now as well, is when Gears of War Judgment came out, which is the spin-off game, which I do rate. I think, it was made by a different studio, under sort of the guidance of the Epic guys. I remember when that came out, I was so obsessed with Gears of War at the time that I bought 3 copies and sent them to my brothers so they'd be there on day one. I was like, "Are you ready? Let's go!" And to buy, I think again, that's a large chunk of your pay packet to buy the 3 copies of the game, and it ended up being maybe one of the weaker games of the franchise, which is funny looking back. But I'm definitely one of these people that has loved all aspects of what the games offer. You will find players that just play the multiplayer. I think one of my brothers has probably not even played the last 2 campaigns, to be honest. They'll get the game and just play the multiplayer again, which speaks to just the depth that these games have. Any other sort of memories about your journeys with Gears of War before I move on to something else? David, Alex, anything else?
I just want to say, I think one of the things I think is fantastic about Gears of War that rings true to this day is just like the truly, it's as much as you can do. I don't think the word everyman game is the right term, but there really is something for everyone in this game. So like if you come to this game or this series for your online shooter, there is that, and there's oodles of that for you to play with. There's the co-op stuff, there is a single player campaign, and as you touched on earlier, there's a depth to the story that I think isn't always immediately apparent if you just sort of bounce off the games or you dip in, play the campaigns and jump out. And in a world in which everybody likes to laud the Souls games for having a story that you have to go looking for, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a world set up in which, if the story is something you're interested in, there are avenues for you to go off and really sort of burrow into it and experience it and sort of lather yourself up in lore when there are other people there that want to play the game and just shoot aliens in the face and get out of there. I just like that. I just think it's sort of the game that has something for everyone depending on what you come to games for, and I just think that's a really fairly unique thing, actually.
It is, like I say, almost unbelievable that they've kept it up, which sort of brings us to our next point where, Gears is placed today in amongst all these other shooters and other games, and how we feel about this. Because what you'll often find now is you think some of the biggest games on planet Earth are, okay, let's just take Fortnite. I'm not a Fortnite player. It's, a battle royale mode that's free to play, and that doesn't come with a campaign and story mode and all this kind of stuff. It's a very small, small package is the wrong word. But then you compare it to something like Gears 5, which came out 2019. God, maybe 3 years ago now. Which, when it came out, still had that full kind of 3-pronged package of the campaign, which you could play solo or co-op, Horde, and the multiplayer. And it almost, maybe to its detriment, means that it didn't get as big of a player base as it deserved or should have, because people are perhaps interested in different ways of playing online shooters these days and what they do. So, as I say, it's still an impressive package. But how do you feel, Alex? How does something like Gears sit alongside games today? And we have no news on Gears of War 6 yet. Nothing. Like, it hasn't even been confirmed really that it's in development. I think we can assume it is, but how does it stand now today? Even thinking about Gears 5, but looking ahead, if it's still going to be this kind of powerhouse, which it was for a long time, does it need to change? Does it need to evolve, or should it continue to offer the stuff that it has done, over the past 15 years or so?
I think this is where I was struggling the most when thinking about what to talk about on these shows and thinking, what do I actually want from the next Gears of War that comes out? Because you get stuck in that mindset of, well, I want it to be Gears. It has to feel like Gears. Yeah. But I think we could probably, I don't know what the figures are because I don't know how you get them when something's on Game Pass, but 5, I'm certain, is not going to have been the most successful Gears launch that they've ever had. So it kind of feels like I saw when I was looking up the Netflix stuff and the animated show today. I saw that they were trying to do it. Their marketing is we're doing it for the 16th anniversary, which is such a dumb number that doesn't require anything doing for it.
Yeah.
I just thought this feels like you're trying to re-energize this franchise because, as you said, clearly so much work was put into 5. I'm pretty sure a friend of mine was really, really hyped on how the upgrade to Series X worked. He was saying this is a proper next gen upgrade they've given this. It's really impressive stuff. They have obviously put so much time and effort into keeping this game going and relevant, and now they're trying to re-energize the fan base by giving them all this extracurricular stuff. I don't know what they put into a new game differently, other than the only thing I could think of that Gears 5 needed to improve on was the open world stuff, the transitioning between fights to fights. There was just nothing there.
Barren wasteland.
Would that not be exhausting, just to everywhere you go you're just getting an absolute locust clusterfuck? I don't know.
Do you think Microsoft have been overly competent? I think competent is about as well as I would describe them, stewards of the franchises. I mean, we've spoken about this with Halo, for example, and
I was going to say,
the open world is initially fun, but actually when you start prodding at it and digging away at it and spending time sort of existing in the world, it's quite empty, and it's empty. Quite by the numbers, and it's quite bland almost. And I remember coming away from Gears thinking that this open world stuff is great and all, but it doesn't feel like it has any substance to the story. It's basically just you walk over here, or I don't know, use your weird snow sailing boat, and it just didn't. I was like, why am I doing this? And it, to me, with Halo as well, it feels like I'm doing it because someone at that company has thought, oh, open world sells. Let's shoehorn that in and not actually think about what it means to the franchise and how we make this interesting.
Yeah,
they've probably both implemented open world mechanics worse than Sonic Frontiers, which is mad chat. But they probably have.
You're spot on. I remember before Gears 5 come out, there was rumblings of open worldness, and people were kind of cold to that already. And then you've mentioned, the next gen upgrade and stuff. So tech wise, what the Coalition do is unbelievable. They are at the top of the industry, really, and they're sort of involved with lots of different things. They worked on the Matrix demo thing that came out to show what the next Unreal is going to look like and all this, and they've put demos of Unreal 5 out that sort of look like Gears as well, and something which is another thing I want to talk about in the future. But so they're dealing with this thing which is the absolute peak of technical prowess, and then to say, well, it's going to be open world, it's but we can't really do open world to that level. So what you ended up with was Gears 5, where it sort of on the floor was fantastic. And I don't know if either of you have played Hivebusters, which is the DLC for Gears 5, which is
briefly
it's not open world at all. It's very self-contained, sort of classic, sort of more linear. It's one of the best looking things of it's last generation as well. That was a last generation update, and it's insane how good that looks. But then we ended up with Gears 5, which had open world stuff and still cramming in that package I've talked about with campaign and the multiplayer and horde. And then we won't get too much into story today, but they did something with the story which is considered quite controversial as well, where you're given a choice towards the end about which character to off, and that is sort of fun on paper, but then it's what's that mean going forward? And either there's no thinking through, and it was like a spur of the moment kind of, we need something dramatic to kind of get the buzz here, or something which I would like to think is happening is they're going to be experimenting more with cross progress and cross generation saves and stuff like that. And going forward into Gears 6, we might be presented with essentially 2 versions of the next game where your choice can carry over and have meaning, something which may have been done in some way or another in the past with some games. And I'm trying to
Mass Effect, I think, is the one that springs to mind.
Exactly, but I think they'll want to take that to the next level and innovate in ways that other people aren't. So, and that's kind of a whole nother conversation. But I do think in this world of battle royale shooters and free to play and Minecraft and all this kind of stuff, Gears is, with its huge budget and this powerhouse that it is almost niche, which is such a weird thing to say.
Certainly outside of PlayStation, right? There seems to be that's where this kind of thing happens more these days.
Yeah, and so they're probably going to have to adopt some kind of model. You know, I would love for them to stick to all that classic Gears that I love, but I just think if they're going to sustain the budgets for these games, they're going to be now trying different things, and we may end up seeing Gears. And whether this is a Microsoft thing, is it going to adopt that Halo Infinite, platform sort of service model where Halo Infinite is now seen as, in theory, that's the game going forward, and it'll do what Destiny does, where they bring chapters in every 8 months or whatever. Is Gears going to go that route? But I find it very hard to believe that the next Gears of War is going to look like the package we've seen for the past, like I say, 15 years, because I'm not sure that's how the broader player absorbs games. So they're going to need to bring casuals back in, and which I'm happy to do. You know, you see online, and there's a lot of hardcore Gears of War players that aren't interested in appealing to the casual players. They don't want it. But we want the game to survive. You have to. So yeah, I'm just sort of rambling really, but yeah,
they're going to need to rethink where they spend their development resources and time, aren't they? If they're going to revamp it in any way, then as you're saying there, they can't split the time across 3 different modes every single time,
exactly,
and keep it fresh. It needs to be, something's going to have to give, kind of like all the things that you do in your spare time. Something's got to go.
Something will have to, and especially if people aren't buying the thing anymore, which they're not, because it's going on Game Pass. I was thinking about this earlier in the year. I was like, should Gears go free to play? But it's like it basically is free to play now. As long as you've got a Game Pass subscription. Obviously there's a big call in the fandom. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on this, but for a Halo style Master Chief collection, but a Marcus Phoenix collection where all previous games get remastered and all a dedicated server comes together for everybody to play. I don't know if, David, do you have any thoughts about a possible Marcus Phoenix collection, and should that come next before a Gears 6, or is there even any point in doing that when the games look as good as they do with the modern upgrades?
I've not heard that, but yeah, I think, on the face of it, I think that's an excellent idea. I think the Gears games are, I can't remember having gone back to the other ones recently, but again, because we covered it in a podcast on A Winner's You, I have gone back and played the Gears Anniversary Edition and the original 360 version. I'm wondering if maybe Gears 2 has the same problem, but the original 360 Gears looks bad by today's standards. So it could really, really do with a bit of tarting up and sprucing up, and that would be a really fun way to do it. I just wonder what sort of position Microsoft are in terms of supporting their games. Again, to use Halo as the example, they've struggled to properly support that game in a way that their fans are really engaged with. And
they just lost their multiplayer guy, didn't they, as well? 343, yeah.
Yep.
The games are the multiplayer space is in a weird sort of both interesting and incredibly sort of ingrained and established. Like, there are the big games, and if you're going to try and go up against a Fortnite or an Apex or something of that ilk, you're probably going to lose, because the multiplayer landscape is different now from what it was when these games came up. So what do you do? I don't know. I'm sort of thinking out loud. There's bits of me that think, do what you do best.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do best, and if you try and copy these well-established things, you're not going to manage to overthrow those things. But then on the other hand, as you say, these games have to have a tail and have to have a life beyond the initial release. Microsoft are in a slightly different position in that being a Game Pass subscription driver is in itself a good thing, and that's perhaps a wrinkle that other sort of live service games don't have to consider. But at the same time, you're right, these games have to be bringing players back, because that if you come to Game Pass for Gears of War, you need to have a reason to keep that subscription going, whether that's other games coming out or Gears of War making it incentivizing for you to keep playing the game. I don't know, is basically what I'm saying. I have no idea.
Yeah.
They seem to have
do you
already
have any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess they probably already captured a lot of people onto Game Pass that would have been Gears fans anyway, is how I would have always viewed it. I distinctly have this memory of feeling like when Gears 5 was coming to Game Pass, I thought, cool, I was going to get that anyway.
Yeah.
It's Gears.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably also, it would sort of define how they approach what they're going to put in the package, because you're going to see Gears coming to Game Pass that you probably already have a subscription to. So you've already got the game. You already know you like Gears. How do they then stop that from just being like, well, when it comes out, I'll play it? Because David and I have this conversation all the time. When trailers come out or things get unveiled, we just go, I don't need to watch a preview of that. Or they've got a 20-minute gameplay preview. Don't need to see it. I'm going to get it anyway. But is that then something that you then think about after you've finished? Or does it just become, oh yeah, Gears 5 came out, I didn't have to pay for it, it was pretty cool, done? Where does it go after that, and why would you think about it again after that? Because you're going to get the next one for free, and it doesn't go anywhere. You haven't got to trade it in, you haven't got to set, it's just sat on your available downloads forevermore. But why would you go back if they don't continue to
this is
build it up afterwards?
This is like a wider conversation that we could have and definitely talk for hours about, that connects even back to things like music, how music is disposable these days because it's all subscription based, and you're shuffling through, and how much are you going to care about this thing if you've not actually really spent any money on it? You might buy an album back in the day that changes your life because it's all you listen to for 3 to 4 to 6 months. Same with the game, but these days, it's just free, I'll just download that, I'll play it for an hour, let's go play something else. So it's extremely difficult to sort of latch onto people. And David, you mentioned Halo. It's insane to me that Halo is in this position. This is Halo, and it's almost a laughing stock. Now, I think Halo Infinite's really good. Like, the gameplay is super tight. It's some of the best it's been in years. But as a offering and as a service, it's just like, what is going on? And how have you dropped the ball on your in theory, your number one IP? And they had a TV show come out this year, and it feels like everyone's been waiting for a movie or TV show for Halo for 20 years. There was no buzz about that. Did anyone care?
There wasn't.
No. It's baffling to me. So the idea that are Microsoft the best, is Gears of War in the best hands with Microsoft? I don't know. I definitely think that's a question, and something we're probably going to talk about more in the future on this podcast. Right, okay, well, as I said, we could talk for hours and hours on stuff, but we are going to start to wrap this one up now. Before we do, any final thoughts for Gears Intel as we look ahead? David, any sign-off thoughts for Gears of War today?
Just thanks for having this idea. I think this is going to be a fun podcast, as we've discussed and touched upon. There's lots to dig in here, and we're not going to be struggling for content, whether that's books, comics, games, whatever. There's lots, Netflix, there's lots to be happening in this, and we've got a long old road ahead of us. So I'm glad to have you two along for the ride with me. Could not think of a more apt B company rabble to come with us. So
fabulous.
Let's go.
Alex, any final thoughts before we disappear?
No, I guess not. David summed it up quite nicely there. I am really stoked to get looking into the deeper universe of Gears outside of the games. That's the biggest reason I wanted to do this podcast, is to branch out into all these new things and tap into what David knows about all this stuff that I've never heard of, and you as well.
Vice versa. Have Alex? So you might, because you went wild on Gears and you've played this on difficulties that just blow my mind. Did you ever get that nutty achievement that's in all the Gears games?
Seriously?
No.
Everybody on the planet,
it was,
6 times over. No, I don't know anyone that's ever got that.
The later, like, I've got the first, seriously, which is just get, but all that is just get 10,000 kills, and it's just like you play long enough, you get that. And I remember I got it for the Ultimate Edition, the remaster they did, and I got the achievement the night before Gears of War 4 came out as well. I was like, whew, that's close. Now you park that and move on to Gears of War 4. But yeah, the more recent ones are, I read the requirements for it, and I think they're just having a fucking laugh with this. Like, who is gonna do all of this stuff? It's like everything on insane, level up every horde thing to master 10 or whatever. It's just absolutely nuts. But also kind of fun, you know, that they put those options in there for people, you know, if they want to dedicate
Yeah.
the time.
They're giving thought to achievements that hardly anybody does anymore. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Cool. Okay. Well, yes, we are going to wrap up. Yes, thank you both for joining me today. This has been our premiere episode of Gears Intel. Hopefully, everyone listening has a sort of clearer picture now of what you're going to be dealing with going forward. The guys have said, I think I speak for the guys, I'm very excited about all the stuff we're going to get into. It's going to be, as I say, we're going to do game retrospectives, looking at the lore, the books, the comics, things outside the games, you know, character profiles, anything we want really. So there's going to be lots to get excited about. I did very briefly mention a YouTube channel earlier. Some of you may have found this podcast via the Gears Intel Twitter account, but also please do go and subscribe to the new YouTube channel. That's going to go hand in hand with the podcast and offer videos and gameplay, and you know, we talked about streams and game nights as well, which is something we'll share more details about as we kind of figure it out ourselves. So yeah, you can follow all of us on Twitter as well. You can follow Gears Intel at Gears_Intel. I'm on Twitter at K_D_B_. David is David Smiley 1, and Alex is Super Thrillix on Twitter. Links for everything will be in the podcast description. Please subscribe to the podcast feed, leave us a rating and review if you like what you hear, and join us next time for episode 2. We're going to be giving our thoughts on what's probably the biggest news story of Gears of War in 2022, and that's the upcoming live-action Netflix movie. Until next time, thanks again for listening, and remember the fallen. That's my sign-off line.
Nice.
I spent ages thinking, what can I say at the end? I can't say keep it gaming. Like, I can't say stay a maniac. Like I'll go with remember the fallen. That's a Gears line.